to the Going Executive Director Show. My name is Brandy and this is Jeff. And our purpose is to bring you the vision, skills, techniques, inspiration, motivation, and daily activities needed for you to build a solid, profitable business. Now remember, this is our team's philosophy. So if you're waiting for our generic show that starts at noon, that's when that's going to be going on. But here we are going to be talking about specifics, and we will be mentioning our company name, which is Legal Shield. So we have started going over the 10 core commitments in the company. What is the 10 core? So Jeff, I will have you take over from yesterday.
All right, guys, Shamala's here. Johnette's here. Hello, hello. Good morning. So what we're going to do is, yesterday we were going over how to get started right. And the second core really has to do with stick and stay. Stick and stay. Jerry, how are you? Stick and stay basically has a couple points to it. Number one is, obviously, it's going to take some time to learn all of the techniques, everything you need to know. It's going to take a little while to learn the basics. Like, if I said for $100, what is the 8-step pattern? Most of you would be like, huh? This is something that actually they used to do inside of our events when I first learned this, is a gentleman would come out and he'd be like, okay, anybody who can take out a piece of paper. Now remember, this is before cell phones. He said, everybody, silent. You can't pass this to anybody. But it was just basically the group of leadership, and he goes, I want you to be able to take out a piece of paper and write down the 8-step pattern. The first person who writes it down and brings it up here, this $100 bill is for you. And it was funny because people would mad dash scramble, and they'd be like, oh my gosh, what is the 8-step pattern? Oh, I know it. Everybody in their head, I know it. He goes, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, I know the 8-step pattern. I know it. And they get out a piece of paper, and you're like, okay, I know Dream is on it. I know List is on it. I know this is on it. And typically people would write down anywhere between 4 to 5 of the 8 steps. And they would run up front, and one guy would always run up front and get it. And sometimes it wasn't the front row, it was the back row. But this was in a, what I call an exclusive group, because it was a group that had done the most presentations. And that group would run up to the front, that person would run up to the front in that group, hand him that, and get a $100 bill. I think I saw one time they give away $300 for it. And he goes, my point is this is the leadership. This is the people who are doing the work. And you guys don't know it inside and out. He's like, it's not like there's 25 things to remember. Max, what's going on? He's like, it's not like there's 25 things to remember. There's only 8 steps in the 8-step pattern. There's only bless me. There's only 10 things to know inside of what? I forgot my allergy medicine again.
I'll go get it for you.
I don't know what I'm doing. I'm getting up and forgetting things. So there's 8 steps in the 8-step pattern. There's 10 things. There's 10 things in the 10 core. And again, if I were to bring up $100 and say, what are the 10 core? Could you write them down and could you bring them over? People would be like, yeah, I think, Kyle, what's going on? Yeah, I think I can bring that to you. I'm pretty sure I can get that to you. So there's 8 steps in the 8-step pattern to get started right, and there's 10 core in the 10 core commitments. But do you know them inside and out? Most people think they know them until, you remove everything, and then you have to write them down, and you're like, well, what was the 1 core, the 10 core, the 5 core? Like, you're missing them, and you can't remember them because you don't really have them memorized. So you have to be in a year to kind of understand the skill set and get it down and actually memorize it. And there's some people who were in a year and still didn't know it. But if you're actually building and you're actually doing these things, this stuff will come to you and you'll know it inside and out. Meaning, it'll be memorized. It'll be something that's ingrained. It'll be something that you don't have to look up to actually write down. And it's funny, that I'd have teachers, and I would have sales trainers, and I would have coaches that would be part of an organization, and they'd be like, oh yeah, I got this, and they don't have it memorized either, and they teach memorization, for a living. So it is kind of comical in a way that we get to that point where we think we know it and we actually don't know it. So that's why you have to be in a year, because most people who are participating in building any direct sales business, let alone Legal Shield, are doing it usually part-time. And anything you do part-time, what I've found is most of the time when you do something part-time, you put part-time effort into it. Meaning, you give it the good old college try. You're like, well, I'm not really interested in doing this, but I'll do it because I have to do it, because I don't know what else to do, so I'll participate. And you give it the college try. You kind of kick the tires, kick the dirt. You'll show up when it's convenient. It's not an all-out thing. Therefore, the result is you get a mediocre to no area of result, because it's just something to do. It's not something to get done, if that makes sense. A lot of people participate at different levels. So I said this on a Sunday call. Excuse me.
There you go.
I said this on a Sunday call. Very often, what you'll see is people who get in our business, in the industry, not only will they give it that college try, but they're just not really actively participating and doing a lot of the work, especially in the beginning, because they're not really sure how all that's going to turn out. They're kind of trying to get that pattern down to know where they're taking somebody. If somebody says yes, well, then what? If somebody says no, then what? If somebody's like, hey, I think I want to do this, then what? They don't know exactly where they're going with it. It takes being around the industry for about a year, and that's why they say stick and stay, or be here a year from now. You want to be here a year from now actually doing the physical work, because the small things that you're doing right are going to start to compound. The things you're doing wrong will start to compound. If you're doing nothing, that will compound too. And it'll be obvious. People are like, well, I've been doing, I love this. I've been doing the work. No, you've been showing up to meetings. That's not the work. The work is everything outside the meeting. Well, let me say that correctly. The work is almost everything outside the meeting. It's like 95-5. 95% of the work that's done is not actually done or seen by anybody that we work with. Why? Because it's usually the contacts, it's usually the presentations, it's usually the phone calls, it's usually the text messages, it's usually the Facebook messages. That's where the physical work is done, not inside the meeting itself. But we show up to a meeting once a week, or haphazardly every once in a while, a couple times a month, and we think we're doing the work. I mean, can you imagine participating in school this way and then demanding that you get a good grade? I know there's people out there who do that, both in business and in school. I'm sure some of the teachers here would tell you that, because we have a bunch of educators that we work with. My mom's a teacher, my dad's a teacher. I've been around educators my entire life, and they'll tell you that people will do that. They'll show up to class every once in a while, they'll turn in no homework, and then complain that they don't have a good grade. And I think it's funny that people will do that in business too. Especially if you're in the sort of class where, you need to learn something and there is a pattern to it, geometry, there's certain math formulas that you've got to do things in a certain order. And it's funny that people will do none of it and question it over and over and over again instead of participating. And then be like, oh my God, the formula is so long, isn't there a shorter version of it? Oh my gosh, I don't like that pattern. Isn't there another way to do this? Can I just punch it into a calculator to get the number that I want? But you have to be here a year from now. You have to stick and say, so there's a commitment level. There's different kinds of commitment levels. There's one commitment level that says I got to get in and do the work. There's another commitment level that you're staying, and it says be here a year from now, because what you also have to do is you have to convey to the people that you're around that you're going to be here a year from now. Part of the problem is, and people don't realize this, is when you're giving it the good old college try and you're in but you're not committed, is the words you're going to use, you're actually going to be telling people by accident more than anything that you don't really plan on staying. And it comes across in your language, it comes across in your attitude, it comes across in your body language when you're sitting in an event. Watch this. If you're sitting in an event and you're the first one to leave out of the room, if you're coming to a meeting and you're the last person to show up, you're conveying a message that you're not serious. You're conveying a message that it's not important. You show up and you're dressed however instead of dressed right for the event. Your mind's on other things. You're not really there at the event. You're thinking of cleaning the house, and you're thinking of doing the yard, and you're thinking of this. And it's okay to think about different stuff, but what I mean is you're not in the element. You're not focused on what's going on. And here's the thing. You're conveying that message to everybody sitting around you, including the people you want to get started and get in. So when you're going out and contacting, the same thing is true. When you're in to build, and you're going to be here a year from now, your words change, your commitment level changes, your energy changes. People see that. The same is true if you're not committed. It comes across. People feel that vibration that it's not really something you're going to be doing long term. And what happens is all of these good habits or all of these bad habits start to compound. And at the end of 1 year, what we see is basically who's doing it right and who's not doing it. Because eventually what happens is it seems like nothing's happening, nothing's happening, nothing's happening, nothing's happening, nothing's happening, and then somebody gets one. And they're like, yes, I got one. And it seems like it took forever to get one. It didn't take forever to get one. It took forever to get you to a point where your energy level, your skill level, your commitment level, and we worked on all these things to get you to the point where you're actually ready to compete in the market. And sometimes it takes 3 days, sometimes it takes 3 weeks, sometimes it takes people 3 months, sometimes it takes people 3 years to get there. It just depends on where you're starting at. Like I was starting at negative 13, right?
Yeah.
I was starting at negative 13. So it took me 10 years to kind of get to the point where all of those skills finally added up. All of that commitment finally added up, where I understood the commitment level. I understood the energy level that I was supposed to put out. I understood the words I should have been using. Because I know for a fact, when I got in, my words were like, if this doesn't work, I constantly was thinking, well, if this doesn't work, here's what I'm going to be going to do. And I'll find another way. I'll find another job. I'll find something else to do. And here's the thing. I hear that in other people. I hear that in people that I work with. Well, it's got to work. I've got to get it. That nervous energy when you're trying to figure it out. Instead of, I'm staying, I'm figuring this out, I'm getting to the top. I don't care what it takes. I don't care who's in the way. I don't care what I need to learn. When it's an all-out commitment, it's a very different language that you'll start with. It's a very different energy that you'll convey to other people. So you go from the skill set and this commitment level, then you start learning these 1% things. And what I call the 1% things, these are the nuggets that can make and break you. These type of nuggets are the ones like, understanding the 4 personalities. So when somebody does give you an objection or does give you some kind of weird, what I would say, stall in the business, like they're not really willing to move, you have to be able to analyze that. It's not a kick everybody in the head kind of business, and it's not a babysitting club. You have to be able to have that conversation and figure out, how are you going to talk to these people? What are you going to say to them? And in what order are you going to say it to them based on their personality? How do they take things? Do they take things where they need it head on? Do they take things where they need it very subtle? Do they take things where they need encouragement? Do they take things where you need to point out what's wrong? And here's the thing, until you understand those 4 personalities, basically what most people do is they're going to use whatever they think is the best way to do it. And typically the way that they think to do it is going to offend, obviously if there's 4 personality types, you think you're going to offend 75% of the people because a quarter of the people. But actually, percentage-wise, it's really off. The D-type personality, there's only about 3% of the population that has a D-type personality. There's only about 11% that have the I-type personality. So if you have either one of those personalities and you're trying to do it based on the way you do it, you're basically going to offend about 90% of the people. 90. I was an extreme of that 3%. Mike's here. What's happening? So I was an extreme of that 3%. So what I ended up doing is I offended about 97% of the people that I was working with, and I couldn't understand why I couldn't get this to work, because everything based on my view was about the task and about getting it done, and it still is. I still find myself going, hey, let's look at the numbers and let's just run this. Hey, here's the objective at hand, here's what we're trying to get done. The problem is the objective at hand has to do with people, and because it has to do with people, I had to learn all of these subtleties of the personalities, all the subtleties of the way people learn. Some people are auditory, some people are kinesthetic, some people are visual. I had to learn that. How are people learning the information? How are they taking it in? Some people get going right away. And some people's glass is half full and some people's glass is half empty. How are they looking at things? What are the deep psychological things in someone's background that may be stopping them from just getting to zero? Now, in network marketing and direct sales, we're not counselors. We're not supposed to be counselors. You're not ever supposed to counsel. You're not ever supposed to... by the way, counseling most of the time leads to the death of an organization, for those of you who don't know this. You're just setting it out there, and that's why the personal development is so important, and that's why, be here a year from now is, if you're here a year from now doing the personal development, what happens is you will eventually find and or run into all of the development stuff you need to personally change all the things that you need to change. I mean, Brandy, based on when you first started, I mean, what were some things, like what were some books or things that opened your eyes?
Definitely the personality books. I didn't really have a great relationship with my mother. Like, we talked, but we never had that really close relationship before. And it was because we had two opposite personalities on either end. And it felt like no matter what I did, I'm like, man, this is just not working. Does she just not care to spend time with me or do this? And it was just... I ended up figuring out what her personality was, and then I was able to talk to her differently and do a couple things differently, and now it's finally where we can communicate back and forth without there being any bickering or without her ignoring me, because that's just her personality. So my mom's actually a very high D-type personality and a C-type personality, so she's very driven, she's very motivated, but she's also extremely analytical. So in my mom's mind, so long as I was fed, she could see that I was happy and I was doing well, she didn't really need to ask how I was doing, which I like to sit down and have conversations with people, and for her seeing me on Facebook and seeing that I'm doing well and that I'm okay, that's all she really needs to know. So something that I did to kind of communicate to her, I'm like, this is something I kind of need. How about twice a week, no matter what, if 5 minutes on the phone, just talking. That's all I really need. I'm like, we don't have to talk for very long. Let's just do something. But ever since I learned those personality types, I've been able to deal with people in my family better. My work environment has been better, because also what's really funny, once you do know the personality types, it is really hard to be mad at people when you understand why they do the things that they do. Because then it makes sense, and you see the reaction through their reaction through their eyes, rather than just reacting to it how you would react to it. Another really good personal development book was John Maxwell's Everyone Communicates, Few Connect. I couldn't remember it for a second. Another one was what was it? Developing a Leader Within You. Honestly, that one's probably the best book to start with, because it really gave me a different expectation for myself of what I need to be doing and what I need to be doing for my team and the people that I'm working with. So, and once I started doing this, it took a year of me just reading all of these books, and I'm from Wisconsin, for some of you that don't know, and when I went back home after a year, everyone's like, wow, you've changed. Like, you seem a lot more confident than what you were before. Like, in your posture is, when people say that your posture looks like you're confident. They're like, you seem a lot more confident than when you used to be, and you just seem a lot happier, in which I was. I ended up figuring out a lot of stuff for myself, and I really was a lot happier a year from when I started. So with that...
So guys, that's kind of just an overview. I mean, everybody's going to be different and have to work on different things, but you're going to have to be around long enough. Chuck, what's happening? You're going to have to be around long enough in any industry to kind of get it. I said in the mortgage business, it took over a year to kind of understand the different scenarios, and that's if you're working on deals every day. It takes over a year to understand the transactions that happen in real estate. Not just the mortgage business, but in real estate. It takes over a year to understand, if you're going to build websites, for instance, it's going to take over a year before you learn the ins and outs of all the widgets and all the tools that you can bring in and the background. You've been blogging for now over a year. I mean, when you first look at it, it's just there's so many tabs to open and there's so many different directions to go. It can be sort of overwhelming. And the same thing is true with building a business like this. It's like, well, you know, you start working and you're like, well, I just need to talk to people. That's all I need to do, you know. And then it comes down to, well, what do I need to say to those people? Then it comes down to, what am I trying to not only say, but how am I trying to convey it? You know, it's, oh, well, this is easy. You just talk to people. I mean, how hard could that be? But when you're wanting to get something out and across to somebody, it can be amazing how by using a couple of the right words, it becomes easy. By using a couple of the wrong words, it becomes very hard. I mean, if you've ever tried to do this your own way, which most of us have, because I know most of the people on here are hard-headed. Because if you're not hard-headed, it's really hard to even pursue a business like this. So you're going to be a little thick. And, you know, you go out and you're like, this is going to be easy. And then you go, well, what exactly should I say to them? Well, how are they going to react? Well, I say this and they'll say this. And you'll have this whole mindset thing, like, of what you're going to say. And you'll create this whole story of, I'm going to say this and they're going to say this and I'm going to say this and I'm going to say this and they're going to say this. And you get all the way down. And then by the time you make a decision to actually approach somebody, that person's already left. Or the person, you know, you finally call the person isn't even home. That's why the scripts and the things are there, just to give you a pattern to run off of. And in some cases, for corporate compliance, they want us to convey the entire message, so therefore somebody doesn't get confused, therefore somebody doesn't jump to conclusions, therefore somebody doesn't get the wrong information or the wrong impression and think that everything is covered under, you know, Title I, for instance, of, you know, what we do inside of Legal Shield. And this is the same thing true in business, not only when we sell the product, but also true when we talk about building the business. You know, well, you just get people. You know, I've heard that before. Well, you just get people. That's how we build a business. You just get people. That's all you do. I was like, well, I wish it was that easy that we just got people. It's a little bit more complicated than that. There's things like they have to sign up. There's things like you actually have to recruit them. There's things that actually need to be taught and, you know, that are kind of important. What do we need to convey to somebody? People are like, oh, well, I would want to convey this to them, or I'd want to convey that to them. And when you're new, you want to convey different stuff based on how you feel. Like, what's really crazy is I can actually tell exactly where somebody's insecurity is based on the excuses they give me. And we all have insecurities. Don't get me wrong. This is not just a you thing. I mean, I have it too, where I'll kind of self-guess or self-question myself before I go to do things. You know, I'll be like, oh shit, am I doing this? Yeah. Okay, did I cover everything? Yeah. And Tom recently, that we work with, brought out some things that I was like, oh man, you're right, I do need to kind of focus in on that and do that, because in the past what I would do is I would share the entire presentation with people, and then I'd get into, you know, here's basically what our comp plan is, but then I would talk about two things. I would talk about the methodology in which we build and then the structure in which we build. And when I talked about the methodology, I would say, hey, here's all the reasons why people don't like these companies and don't get in and have their issues. And people are like, yeah, that's exactly why I haven't never joined. I said the second thing we do is the structure in which we build. The reason why it doesn't work for most people is because most people build straight across. What we're going to do is basically we have to build 3 organizations. To build 3 organizations, basically you want to start with 1. The reason being is most people are doing this part-time. So if you're doing it part-time, you can't work in 3 locations outside of your full-time job. That's like having a full-time job and then going and working 3 part-time jobs. It doesn't work. But you can work a full-time job and then work a part-time business in one leg in one organization, driving it straight down. Ultimate focus. Long-term thinking versus short-term thinking, because in short-term thinking, all you're thinking about is profit. In long-term thinking, you're thinking about security. You're thinking about building something that will last. You're thinking about building depth straight down. And month after month, what we're going to do is the work is we're going to go talk to people, and then the result is we're going to bring somebody in. And the work is we're going to talk to somebody, and then we're going to bring another person in. And then the work is we're going to go talk to people, and then we're going to bring another person in. And we're going to drill this straight down. So if we're going to drive an organization 25 deep, let's say a year, or 50 deep a year, that means it's going to be going down, 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 down. Now, in a couple years, what would those top 10 positions be worth? Let's just say we get it to 100 deep. What would those top 10 positions be worth if the volume at the bottom becomes 500 a month, and then 1,000 a month, and then 2,000 in volume a month, and then 5,000? And I recently saw somebody hit $50,000 a month in premium. $50,000 a month in new business came into their business. Like 1,000 new people, right? Actually, so a little over 1,000 new people came into their business. What would that be worth to those top 10 people in that organization? I mean, they would be in a good situation. They would be in a retirement-based situation if they do what? If they build their other 2 legs. So if we could build one leg for you like that in the next, let's say, 2 years, 12 months, 6 months, 8 months, and we got that done. If we were able to build down like that, think about this. If you had 2 other legs like that, you'd be retired. So if we built a leg like that each year, it would be a 3-year plan to retire. Now, here's the pin. You draw out your plan to retire in 3 years where I'm not robbing banks or selling drugs or whatever else is out there that you can do extremely fast. I want to see something that's legal that you can show me how to do in 3 years. Like, I've got a plan to show people how to retire at $10 million in real estate in 10 years, but it takes getting to 6 figures first. So you get to 6 figures first, I can show you the path to 10 million. It's actually pretty simple once you get to, but here's the hard part. It's the 0 to 100,000 where you have 100 grand to invest. It's going to be the hardest part to get to. That's where this comes in. That's where this business comes in. If you can show me a faster, easier way to get to 100 grand that's legal and legitimate. You know, somebody was trying to show me another company that was tied to something else. And I'm like, that's great, but what has that done performance-wise in the last 2 years? And they're like, well, it's gone up and down, but overall it's been like this. I said, so if you exited it at the wrong time, I know for a fact, because I was watching it, you'd have a 78% negative return. By the way, if you lose 78% of 100 grand, you have like $22,000 left over. I was like, that's really not what I'm looking for. It might be what you're looking for. I said, I'm looking for something that has a little bit more of a history and a little bit more of consistency. He's like, well, how long is yours? I said, well, right now it's 47 years. He's like, oh. I said, therefore, that's where I'm going to put my time, in something that's a little bit more secure that I can control, something that's been around a little bit longer, something that after 47 years still doesn't have the competition out there in the marketplace. I said, they're going to create 10 of what you're talking about in probably the next 12 months, or maybe closer to 100. Actually, they'll probably create 100 of what he's talking about that'll go up and down, up and down, up and down daily. So, with that being said, that's what we have for today. Stick and stay. You got to stay around long enough to figure it out and make it work. And you have to do it with a commitment level that you can convey to other people where other people actually believe you. So, that's what we got for today. I appreciate everybody for jumping on. And tomorrow, we're going to talk about personal development. Thanks, guys.